here I am all by myself again. Jess has abandoned me. But, that's another story. We'll talk about that later. Throughout the day, we've been talking about serverless. We've been talking about serverless on many different services, from EventBridge to step functions to Lambda functions to containers. And we've seen applications built, and we've seen demos going. And hopefully, and you've heard from customers, and hopefully you've learned a lot about that. But one of the questions we get is, where do I start? In fact, we had this earlier, where do I start? And the console is great. So I want to learn serverless. I want to go in and I want to build a Lambda function in the console. It's a great way to learn. But when you get a little further into it, when you want to start building at scale and you want to handle different services and you want to do, you want to share this and have other team members work on it, well, then you need to move to something that's more scalable. And that's what we're going to talk about today. We're going to be talking about building serverless applications with infrastructure as code, or what I call IAC. Now, right up front, I'll tell you there's several different ones. We have internally at AWS, we have CloudFormation, which you've heard of. In fact, we just had a question about it. We have AWS SAM, which is what I'll be focusing on today. We have AWS CDK. You have external ones like Terraform, serverless.com. There's a lot of different frameworks that help you do this, but the bottom line is I encourage you, when you're building serverless, is use the tools that are available and use this. And so I'm going to kind of show you what that looks like. And today, I'm going to go on with what Marcia was talking about with Comprehend and looking at feedback. And I'm going to build a feedback application where you won't be able to actually send it to me, because I'll make up the feedback that I think you would say. I think that'll be better for both of us. But you'll see this happen, and we're going to use Comprehend, which is an AI/ML service. We're going to use Translate, which is also an AI/ML service. We're going to use different things, a Lambda function, step function, so on and so forth. So let's get into it. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you how I kind of approach developing serverless, and I'll kind of try to explain why I do the things I do. So let's get started. Now, disclaimer, I look down when I type, okay? I never learned to find where my fingers are. I'm going to look down. So if you look up and I'm like this, I'm not asleep, unless I am. So, I mean, it's contextual, right? So I may be looking down a little bit here, but yeah, let's jump in and let's get started. So the first thing we're going to do, we've got my computer on the screen there. All right, I'm getting the thumbs up. I did the thumbs up back to the team. They're all looking at me a little weird, but these are thumbs. That's rule number 3 right there. Okay, all right, so first thing we're gonna do is we're gonna create an application. Now, I'm gonna use, like I said, I'm gonna use AWS SAM, and SAM is the serverless application model. And it comes in 2 parts. Now, how many is that? That's 2, right? So first, it has the CLI, which I'm going to show you here, and then it has the templating, which is actually how we store and version our infrastructure. Our mascot is a squirrel. I do actually have a squirrel costume that I've worn to reInvent. In fact, I have 2 costumes. I had to explain that to my wife, so there you go. But let's get started. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to use that SAM CLI, and I'm going to say SAM init, and that's initialize. So Sam's going to ask me, hey, what are we initializing? Well, I'm just going to use some of the AWS Quick Start templates. And these are just templates that we already have out there. And I'm going to use the Hello World template, which is number 1. And then it first asked me, hey, do you want to use the most popular runtime? I'm going to say no to this because I want to show you the different runtimes that are available. And let's just slide this up so we can see a little more here. And so you can see all the runtimes that are available. And I'm going to choose Python 3.9, which is number 15. And I'm going to hit, I can do this as a zip or container. I use zip. And then we'll just take the defaults going through. And then we're going to name the app demo. Okay? That's it. We just created an application. So let's go in there real quick here. And I'm going to open it up in code by spelling it properly. So now we have this application. And my preview of something or other is gone, so we're going to get rid of that. And I'm just going to show you real quick what we've got is we've got the folder, the Hello World. This is our Lambda function. That's our code. And we've got, this is a boilerplate, so we've got a lot of things there to kind of help you understand it. And then we have our template. And this is that, when I was talking about there's 2 parts to SAM, this is that second part where instead of me pointing and clicking in a console, turn on that, turn off that, set this configuration, I store it all in a configuration file that I can share with my friends, right? And they love it. I send them to them for Christmas. They love this kind of stuff. So we do that, and you can see here I've got the function and so on. So that's kind of how we start building. This is where we start. We describe that. Now, one of the things I told you, SAM comes in the two parts. One of the things it has is this in the CLI is this ability to locally invoke a Lambda function. We get a lot of questions about, Eric, do I have to deploy the Lambda to test the code? You actually do not. So I'm going to actually open a terminal real quick here, and we'll open that up. And I can simply say in here, I can use SAM local, and SAM local has several commands. I'll show them to you really quick. Things like generate an event. I get a lot of times, what does an event even look like coming out of a service? I can generate an event and look at that. The invocation, the start API, I can run an actual local version of, and it's a stripped down model of API gateway, and I can run a stripped down model of the actual Lambda service. But for the moment, we're just going to say SAM local invoke, and my spelling is atrocious. I have 2 fingers. I'm still the worst fat finger on the planet, just so you know. So heads up. So you can see here that it invoked it, and I've already got my answer back. And it used a container. So I have Docker running on this, and it supports any of the other the Docker or container programs. So you can see I got my answer back. Now, this is kind of exciting, but we want to see it do a little more, right? So I'm going to actually close this out. And I'm going to go to a one that we've already started, and it looks the exact same at the moment. We haven't done anything to it. Still got the same file. We still got the template. But we're going to go ahead, and I've actually deployed this already. But I'm going to go into development mode. I want to start working against this application. I'm ready to build. I'm excited, right? So here's what that looks like. I'm going to start a program. I'm going to say SAM sync, and I've got my demo name. It's called SID demo, and that's the stack name. And then I'm going to say watch. Now, like I said, I've already deployed this, and we'll see a deploy in a little bit. But what SAM's going to do when I hit enter is it's going to actually go out and check, hey, does what you have in the cloud match what's here locally according to this template? Which it does. So it says, hey, the template hasn't been changed. I don't need to do anything. And so with this deployed, we have this simple little website. This is my design. Marcia was talking about her design. I'm actually a better front-end designer, and I won with this particular design you can see here. And you can see it says hello world. And I'll refresh that just so you can kind of see that in action. And there you go. Now, that was deployed. That didn't take very long, but if I were to deploy this function over and over using CloudFormation, it takes a little while. It takes more than 1 minute, right? So what I could possibly do is, now that I've got SAM sync running, I'm going to go here, and what if I want to change that? So I'm going to go to my code, and it says hello world, and we'll just change this to, we'll say, howdy Jessaru. Okay, she loves it when I call her that. I'm pretty sure. She hasn't said those words, but I'm pretty sure it's true. All right, so I want you to watch down here at the bottom where it says skipped infra. When I hit save on this, I'm going to go save. Now, SAM picks up that there's a change, right? So what it does is it compiles the program and it deploys it. Now, I know you Python developers are out there like going, hold on a minute, Eric. I'm a Python developer, and you don't have to compile Python. You are right. But here's what we do. When we use SAM, SAM gets all those artifacts ready. It makes sure we have all the dependencies and everything going on. So we get that all together and get that, and we zip it up and we set it up. And it's a quick, in fact, we do some magic behind there to always have those dependencies ready and waiting and only change them when they change. So I'd made that change, so let's flop back over, and you can see there, howdy Jessaru. Now, I just talked a whole bunch, which I do. So you didn't get to see how fast that works. So let's change it one more time. So I'm going to go in here, and I like to yell it. Let's yell it. Howdy Jessaru, okay? So I'm just going to add an exclamation point. I'm going to save it. Now you watch down at the bottom. It's building, it's deploying, and it'll say it's done in a minute. And it's done. So I go over here and I refresh that, and this is a live website, right? This is a live website that you could actually go to if you could read that long, abstracted thing that I'm not going to share. But this is ready to handle a large amount of traffic, right? And so this way I can develop and I can iterate against a Lambda function and continue to build on top of that. All right. So let's change this up, okay? You're like, Eric, this is great, but it's really not that exciting. Let's get exciting, or what I think is exciting. All right, so the first thing we're going to do, now, I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to bring up my terminal here. And one thing I'm going to do is I'm going to get rid of all those I'm going to get rid of those changes. So really quick here, let me change this here. And I'm going to stash those changes. Okay, so that I can change, because what I've done here is I've actually used Git, so I can, rather than watching me type in or copy and paste a bunch of code, we're going to use Git to change that out. So what I've got is we're going to change this, and the minute I change, I'm going to say Git checkout, and I'm actually going to stage 1. The minute I hit enter, SAM's going to pick up these changes. So I'm going to hit enter, and then I'm going to flip back over. So let's do that real quick. All right, so we did that. Now, you can see down here, SAM has said, oh, okay, there's a bunch of changes going on, including some infrastructure changes. So because there's infrastructure changes, I need to go ahead and deploy using CloudFormation and bring those all in. And while that's doing that, I'll explain it to you. So first thing I do is I no longer have a folder that says Hello World, because I don't want that to be the name of my application. And we'll go in here. And inside of here, let's just show I've got my requirements, which are those dependencies, Boto3 and DynamoDB JSON, which is something I use to marshal and unmarshal data in Python. And then here's the function. And really, all this is doing is this is just scanning a database. Okay, it's doing a scan against DynamoDB, and we'll get to that a little later. Now the template has changed quite a bit. Okay, and again, you can see it deploying out here. So when I said deployment, this is kind of an example of what that looks like. So here's what I did in the template. The first thing I did is trying to be as smart and efficient. I use the globals area of my SAM template, and I combine all my repeating things like the size, my timeout, my memory size, things for my function. But one of the things I want you to notice is I'm passing an environment variable into my Lambda functions called table name. And it is going to get the name of my table dynamically. Down below, you're going to see, and I'll show you to you in a minute, where I'm deploying a DynamoDB table. And so I want to dynamically take the name of that and give it to the Lambda function, right? Now, let's go down here. I've changed the Lambda function. This is going to be the get all items function. So this is scanning and grabbing all the items. A couple things, I've changed the architecture. I've actually switched it over to the Graviton using ARM64. And I'm passing a policy. The purpose of this Lambda function is to read the database. So therefore, the only policy or the only privileges I'm going to give is I'm going to allow it to read only. And these are pre-built policies that we have. Finally, I'm creating a state machine, which is a step function. And we'll climb into that a little more. All I really need to create the step function is this, just these lines here. The one right above it too. This I'm also turning on tracing. I'm adding some policies. Again, the step function is going to write eventually, so we give it write. I'm going to access comprehend, so I have a policy for that. I don't have a policy for translate, so I'm actually doing an inline policy for that. And finally, some logging. And then I set up the logging, and then I have this event. Now remember, we're talking about event-driven architecture, right? So I have an event, so for the Lambda to invoke and for the step functions to be invoked, I'm using an event, and that event is an API gateway call. So I'm putting API gateway in front of both of them. All right, so the last thing we're doing, we've got our logs for the state machine, and then we have this table that we're creating. And for the moment, I'm naming it. I don't usually name things. I let CloudFormation do it, but for this, I'm naming it. All right, so that has created the functions. So let's go ahead, and you can see down below the functions created, right? So, or the stack is updated. So we're going to go to our function, and I'm going to use Postman as my client. I don't have a fancy client like Marcia does, and that was a thing of beauty. But I'm going to go to my client, and I'm going to do a get all against this. And basically, I'm just calling this on a get to the root. And so what I've got, and it loads up, and then, okay, this was not expected. I was expecting an empty array. But what I got here was an internal server error. So what do? Well, this is where SAM comes in real handy, right? So I'm going to go over to SAM, and I'm going to actually say, let's bring up this other terminal here, and we'll clear this out. And then I'm going to say, I'm in that same folder, I'm going to say SAM logs, and again, the stack name, and I'm going to tell it to tail the logs, that -t. So I'm going to hit enter here, and then I wait a second. SAM will aggregate the logs across any services that I'm using. API gateway, step functions, or Lambda functions, and it'll grab those logs. So I can go up here and I can say, oh, yeah, okay. I have this default placeholder called my table. Well, that's not going to work. That's not the name of my table. Remember, I named my table already. So let's go back to my code, and I'm going to go to the actual code itself. And I'm going to look in here, and yep, sure enough, there it is. There's the offender. So I'm going to go ahead and change this. And I have to remember now how to do environments. So I'll, oh, hey, there we go. Code Whisperers help me out. So Code Whisperer says, hey, os.environment table name, that's the name of this. So we'll go ahead and save that. And it's funny because you see the changing down here. Sam's picked it up. It's pushing that. It's funny because I even took and actually put a note in here to myself, hey, replace this with your table name. So, all right, I failed on that. In fact, I'm gonna get rid of this, and we'll just do a save there. And then let's go over, and it's building that out. I don't know why I'm changing it for code or for a comment, but I did. All right, so let's go back over to our Postman here, and let's see if we get a better result. And that is the expected result, okay? So I've been able to use SAM to quickly debug where the problem was and fix it. So this is my result. I have this array, and now we're ready to rock, okay? But the array is empty. It's not exciting. We want to get exciting. We want to do something fun. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go over to step functions, and we can bring it up here. And if I do a refresh here, I have a new step functions called post state machine. This is the state machine that we're going to build. And you already saw this a little bit with Ben. So we're going to go in and we're going to edit this. And the way I do it is I will deploy a bare minimum state machine. You can see here it's just a start, a pass, and an end. I'll deploy a bare minimum state machine, and I'll deploy the resources I think it's going to need. So as I'm building and configuring inside of the Workflow Studio, everything's available to me, including the role and all of that. So I don't have to do that all in the console. But I do like to use the Workflow Studio to build, because I feel like it's really, it's a great product, so it's very helpful. So let's go ahead and kind of do the idea. Now, I'm going to explain the app again. So the first thing we're going to do is when we send in text, we're going to detect, and we'll actually type sentiment. We're going to detect sentiment. So that's the first thing we're going to do. Now, we don't need this pass state anymore. So based on the sentiment, I'm actually going to make a choice. So let's get rid of that filter. And I'm going to make a choice, and I'm going to read that sentiment. I'm going to say, hey, is it nice or is it mean, right? If it's nice, then I'm going to do something, and I'm going to put that in the default because I think by default you're going to be nice, right? So I'm going to put in a parallel. I want it to do two things. The first thing I want it to do is translate, okay? Let's actually spell the word out there. So we're going to translate. We'll do one for German, and we'll do one for Spanish, right? Now don't worry about the red up here. It just doesn't like that I haven't configured it yet, but we'll get there. And then finally, if all is well, we're going to do a put item, and we'll drop that into DynamoDB. If, however, I don't like what it is, then we'll just write the data, and that's it. So you can see here, if we close this out and kind of center this, we'll zoom out a little bit. I've kind of used step functions to think through my project, right? So I thought that through, and how's that going to work, okay? So I could go through and configure all this, but remember, we're talking about infrastructure as code. We want to show how to build this without having to do all the configuration, or we want to store it in a way we share it. So I've actually built this all out with configuration as code. So we're going to go back here, and let's actually go back to the terminal real quick. And once again, we are going to clear it. So we're going to stash any changes we've done. And then we're going to say git checkout stage 2. Okay, now here's what happens with that. So already, you didn't see it, I didn't get over fast enough. With SAM Accelerate, it is treated as code. The ASL, or the Amazon States Language, is treated as code. And if I have it in an external file, then SAM will update the state machine immediately using the API. So my state machine's already, or should already be updated. So let's take a look at the changes real quick. So there's this file called post.asl.json. So we'll walk through this, and I'm not going to explain all these, but you can see here the whole, everything we need. So I'm scrolling through there, and I may go in here and say, you know what, this isn't really a comments processor. This is a feedback I can't even spell assessor, so I'll say detector. You stay away from the words you can't spell. I don't even know if that's spelled right. So let's save that again. But I want you to see that again. So there's the syncing step functions, and it's done. It's that quick. Now here's a cool thing. In here, with the AWS plugin, I can actually render a graph. And does that look like what I was building earlier? It does. Let me answer my own question. It does. It looks a lot like what we were doing. All right? So if I go back over to our step functions, and let's get out of here. Let's just cancel anything I've done. We're going to leave that. And then I'm going to do a refresh on the whole page. Yes, reload. And you'll notice now my step functions have been updated. This is live and ready to use. So we can make this happen, and this graph matches what we have over here. All right, so we've built that. Let's see it in action, see if it works. This is always the time where you go, oh, so I'm going to cross my fingers, but now I'm going to uncross them because I can't do anything while they're crossed. So you do what you do. All right, so the first thing we're going to do is we're going to send something nice, right? So if Jess were here, I know for a fact she would say the hairstyle on Eric is a thing of modern beauty. All right, so we're going to go do that. Now, first of all, let's just real quick, let's go ahead and do a send against our system itself. So we're having the Lambda read. We still get back the empty array. So now I'm going to go in here, and I'm going to send this. Okay, so I'm going to post to the state machine. Now, this is an asynchronous call. I'm actually doing an async invocation of the state machine. And this means that and Ben talked about this earlier, all we're going to get back is an acknowledgement. Hey, I got your request and I'm working on it. And for step functions, it looks like this. Here's the execution ARN, or Amazon resource number, and here's the start date. Here's where it happened. Now, if we go back to our get all, we can look at this. Let's go ahead and send and read that back. And we've already gotten a response. This happened very fast. So it shows me the comment. The comment was, the hairstyle on Eric is a thing of modern beauty. It seems to be positive, which obviously, it is, right? And then, so because it's positive and I want to share it with my friends in Spanish and German, you can see El Pinedo de, if Marcia was here, she'd be tackling me, but I'm going to do it anyway. El Pinedo de Eric es una cosa de belleza moderna. Yeah, they're not clapping out loud, but they're pretty impressed behind the cameras. And the German, Die Frisur von Eric ist von moderner Schönheit. That's all I got. All right, so now let's take a look at the negative. Let's send a negative. So the hairstyle on Eric is ridiculous and out of control. My wife sent this in, so we're going to use that as our post. So let's go ahead and send that. And I'm going to flip over immediately and reload. And you can see I've already got a response. So when you think asynchronous, sometimes we think, oh, it's going to take a long time. But it's not. It's quick. It happens very fast, right? And in this, it's not positive. It's actually negative. It's a little depressing. So we didn't translate it because I'm not sharing that with my friends. But we did get some more information back from Comprehend. And it says, hey, this is 93% negative. It's a little hurtful. So that's kind of how I get started when I'm building with infrastructure as code, right? So when you want to dig in, you want to be able to share these out. Now we take a look at this template. I can actually, and you're already seeing it in effect, I can save this in GitHub, I can version it, I can share it. And with that, I'm going to check out and pass it on.